Today, we're diving into one of the most chaotic, transformative, and frankly, bloody periods in all of history, the century-long collapse of the Roman Republic and the violent birth of the Roman Empire.
I mean, that's the big question, right? It's this huge historical mystery. This wasn't a sudden event. It was a slow, painful death spiral. So what exactly pushed it over the edge?
You got to understand, for nearly 500 years, this was the absolute bedrock of what it meant to be Roman. Power was shared, it was balanced. The idea of having a king, they despised it. And that core principle, that is exactly what was at stake. But by the time we get to the 1st century BCE, that bedrock we just talked about, well, it was starting to show some pretty serious cracks. Let's dig into why.
What's so wild is how all these problems just fed into each other. Rome gets huge, right? It expands everywhere. This makes a tiny group of people unbelievably rich, but leaves almost everyone else behind. And here's the real kicker. This creates a brand new danger. The armies, the legions, they become more loyal to their charismatic generals who promise them land and money than they are to the Senate way back in Rome. And that, well, that's the ticking time bomb.
And that time bomb, it was about to go off. That whole question of loyalty was about to be put to the test, leading one man to shatter one of Rome's most sacred traditions.
So let's meet our first two major players in this drama, Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Both of them were brilliant generals, hugely popular with their troops, and intensely ambitious. And they both wanted the exact same thing, to be the top dog in Rome.
This was the point of no return, a moment where a political rivalry explodes into something that would permanently scar the Republic.
So here it is. Sulla does what was completely unimaginable. He marches his own Roman legions into the city of Rome. You didn't do that. It was the highest form of treason. But here's the thing, it worked. He took power. And in doing so, he basically wrote a very dangerous playbook for every ambitious general that came after him.
So, Sulla broke the seal. He proved that an army could beat political tradition every time. He created the roadmap for taking power, and you can be sure the next generation was paying very, very close attention.
In the chaos that followed Sulla, these three men clawed their way to the top. You have Julius Caesar, the military genius, Pompey the Great, another celebrated general, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, who was basically the wealthiest man in Rome. They formed this unofficial alliance to run the show. But let's be honest, in the high-stakes, big-ego game of Roman politics, a pact like that was never going to last.
And sure enough, after Crassus dies, it all comes down to Caesar versus Pompey. Now, Caesar has just conquered all of Gaul, making him a public hero and incredibly powerful. The Senate, which is now firmly on Team Pompey, gets nervous. They see him as a massive threat, and they give him an ultimatum. Disband your army and come back to Rome as a regular citizen. This was the moment. Caesar is standing with his army at the Rubicon River, the legal boundary of Italy. If he crosses with his army, it's civil war, no question. If he obeys, it's political suicide and probably literal death. He chose war. By crossing the Rubicon, he was declaring war on the Senate and his old ally Pompey. With that one move, there was no turning back. Not for him, and not for the Republic.
And Caesar won. Decisively. He crushed Pompey's forces and returned to Rome as its undisputed master. The Senate then names him dictator for life. But for a lot of the traditionalists, dictator for life sounded an awful lot like king, the one thing the Republic was founded to prevent.
That fear, the fear that Caesar would make himself king, led to one of the most famous assassinations in history. But killing the dictator didn't save the Republic. It just kicked off one last brutal round of civil war.
On the Ides of March, a group of senators, thinking they were heroes, stabbed Caesar to death right on the Senate floor. Their goal, they said, was to restore the Republic. The great irony, of course, is that they achieved the exact opposite and plunged Rome into 13 more years of chaos.
With Caesar gone, there's a huge power vacuum, and a new trio emerges to fill it. This time, it's an official team-up, recognized by law. You've got Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, Mark Antony, his top general, and a guy named Marcus Lepidus. They had one thing in common. They wanted to hunt down Caesar's assassins. They did, and then, inevitably, they turned on each other.
Once Lepidus was sidelined, the entire Roman world was split between two men. On one side, Caesar's young, cunning heir, Octavian. On the other, his powerful, charismatic general, Mark Antony, who had allied with Queen Cleopatra in Egypt. This was it, the final act in the Republic's long tragedy.
The final showdown happened at a massive naval battle off the coast of Greece called Actium. Octavian's fleet absolutely crushed the forces of Antony and Cleopatra. After that defeat, they both took their own lives, leaving Octavian as the sole undisputed master of the Roman world.
And just like that, the wars were over. A century of bloodshed had ended. One man stood supreme. All that was left was to make the new reality official.
So, in 27 BCE, the Senate, which was now completely under his thumb, gave Octavian a new name, Augustus, which means the revered one. He was smart, though. He was careful to keep up the appearance of the old republic. But make no mistake, all the real power was now in his hands. He was Rome's first emperor.
When you lay it all out, you can see it's just this undeniable domino effect. Sulla's march gives Caesar the playbook. Caesar uses it, and his death sparks the final power struggle. And that struggle leaves one man, Augustus, standing on the ruins of the Republic.
And it's just staggering to think about the timescale here. This wasn't a quick revolution. It was 100 years of political violence, civil war, and societal collapse that tore a 500-year-old system to shreds.
And that leaves us with a final thought. The story of Rome's fall isn't just ancient history. It's a timeless warning about what can happen when political norms are shattered, when loyalty to a person replaces loyalty to a state, and when powerful people decide the rules just don't apply to them anymore. It forces us to ask a question that is as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago.